Samsara dava nalalita loka Janaya karanya ganaganadvam Praptasya kalyana gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditya Madhya Manaswara Sena Romancha Kampa Shutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Shri Vigrahara Dhananitya Nana Shingaratan Mandira Majanado Yuktasya Bhaktam Shaniyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Chaturveda Shri Bhagavad Prasada Swadhana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Kritava Triptim Bhajata Sadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Shri Radhika Madhavayora Para Madhurya Lila Guna Rupa Namna Pratikshana Swadhana Lalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Nikunjayuno Ratikeli Siddhai Yaya Libi Yuktira Pekshaniya Tatati Daksha Dativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Sakshadarit Vina Samasa Shastir Uktastata Bhavyata Eva Sadhi Kintu Prabhuya Priyavatasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Yasya Prasadad Bhagavat Prasado Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutopi Mayam Stuvam Sasya Yasya Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam 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 Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shataine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Radha Nila Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Radha Nila Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Goyanita, Jaya Goyanita, Jaya Goyanita, Jaya Goyanita. Nita Gora Haribo, 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 Nita Gora Haribo.
ISKCON BBT Bhaktivedanta Institute founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Brahmhamsa Prataka Acharya Stota Shota Shri Srimati Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Nama Acharya Srila Haridasa Thakur ki jai. Premi se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Data Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Gauradan ki jai. Shri Prajabhumi Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Navadvipamaya Pradam ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Shri Ayodhya Dham ki jai, Ganga Mai ki jai, Yamuna Mai ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Samarita Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Harinama Sankirtan ki jai, Gaura Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Prahladaladadaine. Hiranyakashipurvakshaha. Shilatankanakalaye. Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha. Yato yato yami tato Narsimha. Bahe Narsimho Hridaye Narsimho. Narsimha Madim Sharanam Prapate. Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Singam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanurindam Kesavadirata Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare. Kesavadirata Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Narsimha Dev Jayo Narsimha Dev Jayo Narsimha Dev Jayo Narsimha Dev. Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jayo Jaya Gurudev. Jai Lakshmi Maharaj.
Devi Satyavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindaya Tulasi Devaya Priyaya Keshava Sacha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindaya Tulasi Devaya Priyaya Keshava Sacha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavatai Namo Namaha. Vrinda Devi Tulasi Maharani Ki Jai.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Priyasi Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Priyasi Namo Namaha Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Ei Abhilashi Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Ei Abhilashi ये तुम्हारा शरण लोय तारा वंश पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन वासी मोरा ए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास नायने हरि बो सदा युगल रूप राशि এই নিবেদন দারো সকিরানুগত করো এই নিবেদন দারো সকিরানুগত করো সেবাদি করো দিয়ে করো নিজ দাসী सेवादि कर दिए करो निज दासी दीना कृष्णा दासे को ये ना मोरा होय दीना कृष्णा दासे को ये ना मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये नबासी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये नबासी प्रेयसी नमो नमः यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवा सत्या विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवे सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवा सत्या विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवे सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवा सत्या विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवे सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः। तुलसी महारानी की।
Also grant me residence in the precious coast of Shiv and Vrindavan Dham. Thus, when I live my vision, I shall always behold the beautiful person Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow the Karhadanso's Vraja. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna prays. May I always swim in the love, Shri Radha and Govinda, Srimati Tulsi Maharani ki jai. There are 10 fences in the matter of chanting holy name that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees of dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the name of the demigods like Lord Shiva or Brahma to be equal to independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or the swings of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities and strength of chanting holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritual activities, offering the Veda the fruit activities, karma, ganda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glory of the holy name. 10. To not complete faith in chanting holy names, and to maintain material attachment in understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to achieve desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees, Lord. They are just as I trees who can fulfill to everyone, and they are full compassion for fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Jeto darpana marjanam pavamahadavagni nirvapanam. Shriya gairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavatu jivanam. Anandam pudivardhanam pratipadam purnamita sadanam. Sarvatmasnapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Nam namakari bahuda nija sarva shaktis. Tatra pita niyamita smaranena kalaha etadishi tava kripa bhagavam mamapi turudevami disham yahaja ninhanurakaha trinatapi sunicena tarorapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtanya sadaharihi na dhanam na chanam na sundarim kavitam vajagadisha kamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishware Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tvai Ayinanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sthitaduri Satesham Vichintaya Nayanam Karadashuru Daraya Vadanam Katkata Rudaya Gira Purakai Nichitam Vapurkata Tava Nama Kahane Bhavishyati Yuga itam nimishena chakshusha pravisha itam Shunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virahe name Ashrisava padaratam pinnashtumam Adarshanam marmhatam karotuva Yatha tatha va vitatatu lampato Mat prana nathastu se eva naparaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai.
Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the strongest tree. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others.
In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O
Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I fall into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at recitation of holy name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Siksastakam Ki Jai. Shri Guru Pranam prayers Ki Jai. Om Ganyatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatahapachikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganagunitam Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaganala Lalita Shri Sakanivitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschasya Satarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Namini Shri Vasavanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Pujvala Madhya Shri Rupanika Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruda Bhaktisiddhanta Dhantaharine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakta Vinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Babu Mestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Sri Jagannathayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachase Namaha Panchatattvatkam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratur Pangor Mama Matergati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalkadumadaha Shrimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastadi Bihi Sevyamana Smanami Shriman Rasa Rasaram Bivam Sivata Tatastita Kasan Venus Swaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai.
He
Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Satmasukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vriteshu Surabhirapalantam Lakshmi Sahasra Sambhrama Sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venum Kvanantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksham Parahavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpakotika Maniya Vishesha Shobham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasatwana Malya Vamsi Ratnagadam Pranaya Keli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribangala Litam Niyata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashyanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhujala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Ashutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabam Madurlabam Atma Bhaktau Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Shatavatsara Sampragamyo Vayo Ratapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam Sopyastiyat Prapadasimniya Vichantatve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopi Asaurachaitam Jagadanda Kotim Yakshaktirasti Chadadanda Jayantantaha Andantarasta Paramanu Jayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yadbhava Bhavitadiyo Manujasthataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahishasana Yanabhusa Suptarya Meva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabhis Tavirya Eva Nijarupa Taya Kalabhihi Goloka Eva Nivasati Akilatma Bhuto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hrudayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Shukalani Yamina Tishtan Nana Vataram Karodu Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Sambhavat Paramam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Brahma Samhita ki jai. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamsundara is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet, he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas, by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by her ever-blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nishinga, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Shri glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You can recite with me if you want. Janmalasya yata divyad itaratas charte suavigya swarat tene brahma hidaya adikavaye muyanti yatsurayaha tejo varimidam yata vinimaya yatrati sargo misha damna srena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. O my Lord, O Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharma projita kaitavoja paramo nirmat siddhanam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapa trayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kimva Parir Ishwaraha Sadyo Hidi Avarudyate Chakriti Bihisususabistakshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold Bhagavatam compiled is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3 Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam sukhamukad amritam dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur ahur aska bhuvibhavaka. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadev Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Brahmasamhita ki jai. So, what's very interesting in the second verse, Dharma Pujita Kaitravo Cha Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam, where it says, the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. This is a major statement. And this is something that definitely can differentiate Krishna consciousness from other, let's say, movements or philosophies. So in other words, it's saying the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. The key is for the welfare of all. So in other words, let's say there's the Republican Party or there's the Democrat Party. Well, they each have a certain, what's called constituency. Followers or people who ascribe to them and believe their, what you would call, interpretation of reality. But see, that is not pure Krishna consciousness. That is sectarian. Sectarian means they have a bodily conception of life. But when it says that the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all, there's no sectarianism there. There's simply being able to distinguish between the absolute truth and for the welfare of everyone. It's not just for human beings. It's not just for people who are Democrats or people who are Republicans or people who are members of a certain ethnic group. It's for everyone. So this is a unique, let's say, explanation of the transcendental nature of Krishna consciousness. So, and it's a major statement, and it differentiates Krishna consciousness from just about every other type of movement or religion. Just like in Christianity, you have to accept Jesus. If you don't accept Jesus as the Son of God or as God, then you're doomed. Well, that's not what's being said here when it says that the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. No one is excluded. No living entity is excluded in this statement. Not only human beings, no living entities are excluded. So, and what is the highest reality? That is understanding who Krishna is. At that point, there's no more prejudice. There's no more this group, that group. Everyone is included when in this statement, and every living entity is included in this statement. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So almost everyone in this material world has a material conception of life. So therefore, they cannot distinguish between reality and illusion as long as they keep the material conception of life or the bodily conception of life. So I just wanted to make that point. These verses, the first 3 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, are extremely profound. As we've said before, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he lectured 3 months on the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's how profound it is. Okay, so today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 11, and verse number 34. Now, we're almost at the end of this chapter. From this point on, it's very important to have a notebook and take notes and do some homework. And you'll see that you'll learn a lot of things, and it'll stick in the mind if you do the homework. Okay, so therefore it says, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 11, text number 34. Yadardham ayushastasya paradham abhidhiyate purva parardo pakranto hyaparodhya pravartate yat, that which, ardham, half, ayusha, of the duration of life, tasya, his, parardham, a pararda, abhidhyate, is called, purva, the former, pada arda, half of the duration of life, apakranta, having passed, he, certainly, apara, the latter, adya, in this millennium, pravartate, shall begin. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The 100 years of Brahma's life are divided into 2 parts, the first half and the second half. The first half of the duration of Brahma's life is already over, and the second half is now current. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The duration of 100 years in the life of Brahma has already been discussed in many places in this work, and it is described in Bhagavad Gita 8:17. Also, 50 years of the life of Brahma are already over, and 50 years are yet to be completed. Then, for Brahma also, death is inevitable. Okay, so we can see the thoroughness of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's explaining so many things in depth. And one of the most important things is time. So there are different ways of calculating time. But the best way to calculate time is to use it in Krishna's service. So if we do that, then time is no longer a destructive force for us. It supports us. But when we waste time, it becomes destructive, and we begin to lose our vitality and so many other things. So this explanation of the calculation of time from the atom and so forth, it's to help us to understand that time is the most precious thing we have. How do we know that? Because you could be the richest person in the world. You can't buy back any time. You can buy so many other things, but you can't buy back time. So time, therefore, becomes the most important and most expensive or let's say the most precious thing that we have. And if we use our time in Krishna's service, then it's not an enemy, it's a friend. It supports us. Because Kala is the impersonal manifestation of Krishna. And Kala is controlling everything in the material universe. Okay, so if we go to this verse, 8:17 in Bhagavad Gita, it's a very important verse. Prabhupada mentioned it many times. And let's take a look at it. It says, Sahasra Yuga Parajayantam Aharyat Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam Teho Ratra Vido Jana. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together from the duration of Brahma's one day. Taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. So, you have Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. These are 4 periods, and the subtotal of their duration is 4,300,000 years. And this thing has to be tightened. Okay, so one day or one kalpa is 1,000 cycles of these 4 ages. So if you read carefully this one verse, 8:17, you will learn a lot of things about time. So a yuga, so you have a kalpa is one day of Brahma, or 1,000 cycles of these 4 ages. And a yuga is one of these 4 ages. Okay. So it says, the duration of the material universe is limited. It is manifested in cycles of kalpas. A kalpa is a day of Brahma. So these are notes that you can take. You want to learn what these words mean. So you have a yuga is one age. Like, for example, you have Kali Yuga. That's the one we're living in now, right? So, or you have Treta Yuga, or Dwapara Yuga, or Satya Yuga. Then you have Kalpa. Kalpa is one full day of Brahma, or 1,000 cycles of these 4 yugas. So it says, a kalpa is a day of Brahma, and one day of Brahma consists of 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas or ages, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. The cycle of Satya is characterized by virtue, wisdom, and religion, there being practically no ignorance and vice, and the yuga lasts 1,728,000 years. In the Treta Yuga, vice is introduced, and this yuga lasts 1,296,000 years. In the Dwapara Yuga, there is an even greater decline in virtue and religion, vice increasing, and thus yuga lasts 864,000 years. And finally, in Kali Yuga, the yuga we have now been experiencing over the past 5,000 years, there is an abundance of strife, ignorance, irreligion, and vice, true virtue being practically non-existent, and this yuga lasts 432,000 years. In Kali Yuga, vice increases to such a point that at the termination of the yuga, the Supreme Lord himself appears as the Kalki of Latara, vanquishes the demons, in other words, kills the demons, saves his devotees, and commences another Satya Yuga. Then the process is set rolling again. So you see, in the creation, there are many cycles. Now, this is the cycle of the yugas, but there's also the carbon cycle, and there's the cycle of the periods of time. Like, for example, you have summer, fall, winter, and spring. So there are many, many cycles going on, and time also functions in a cycle. So, and Brahma he lives what you would call 100 years. So if you calculate the duration of the life of Brahma, it comes out to 311 trillion years, 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. Now that's an unimaginable duration of time, and that's what the calculation is. That's the calculation given in this verse 8:17, and it says, "These 4 yugas, rotating 1,000 times, comprise 1 day of Brahma, and the same number comprise 1 night. Brahma lives 100 of such years and then dies. These 100 years, by Earth calculations, total to 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. By these calculations, the life of Brahma seems fantastic and interminable." Interminable means unending. It's a nice word to learn, interminable. So write that word down, because we learn English at the same time that we learn Bhagavad Gita. Interminable, interminable. But from the viewpoint of eternity, it is as brief as a lightning flash. What? It just shows you the relativity in the material world. The perception of time on the earth is different than the perception of time on the heavenly planets, and so forth. In the causal ocean, there are innumerable Brahmas rising and disappearing like bubbles in the Atlantic. Brahma and his creation are all part of the material universe, and therefore they are in constant flux. Okay, that's another nice word, F-L-U-X. Flux means constant change. You can look these words up to make sure I'm giving you the right definition. So you have flux and you have interminable. In the material universe, not even Brahma is free from the process of birth, old age, disease, and death. Brahma, however, is directly engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord in the management of this universe. Therefore, he at once attains liberation. Elevated sannyasis are promoted to Brahma's particular planet, Brahmaloka, which is the highest planet in the material universe, and which survives all the heavenly planets in the upper strata of the planetary system. But in due course, Brahma and all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka are subject to death, according to the law of material nature. Now, there are a lot of real important takeaways in this one purport. First of all, now we know what the duration of Brahma's life is. It's an unbelievable, fantastic number, 311 trillion, 40 billion years. You can't even imagine what that is, right? But Brahma's perception of that is like our perception of living 100 years, right? So that's the perception of relativity in the universe. More importantly is the fact that even Brahma is subject to death. That means he's a jiva, just like us. But he's attained such a high position because of his engagement in devotional service. And if he correctly does his devotional service throughout his life, he goes back to Godhead at the end. But he's still subject to death, and we read yesterday that even Brahma is afraid of death. Even Brahma is afraid of death. Imagine us, right? So then what's very important for us to take away from this purport is that there are laws of material nature. Now, this is what scientists accept also, but in a very partial way. We have to accept this statement fully. That is, that there are not only laws governing, let's say, gravitation or things like that, but there are laws governing also the duration of life of people, and the laws that are, any law is a limiting thing. So let's look up the word law. Look up the definition of the word law. You know what the definition is? Yeah, what is it? Yes. Very good. What's it say?
The system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating.
As a what?
As regulating the actions of its members, and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties.
Yeah, that's limiting it to a community or a country.
Yeah.
But here it says the law of material nature. It's the whole material nature. Yeah. Anybody else?
A rule defining correct procedure or behavior in a sport.
And it's what?
In a sports.
Sports. Okay. Well, we're talking about laws of material nature. Scientists also accept that there are, nature functions in a predictable way, and it's possible for human beings to discover some of those predictabilities. But there's a much bigger statement here, that laws of material nature. That means that there are things, because a law is a limiting thing. It limits you to certain, let's say, parameters, or certain things that you can do and certain things you can't do, right? So this is what's misunderstood by the scientists. They give these partial definitions, just like what you just read, were partial definitions compared to law of material nature. Right? Go ahead, read it.
So this third definition is a statement of fact to the effect that a particular natural or scientific phenomena always occurs if certain conditions are present.
Okay. But I'll read that again.
A statement of fact to the effect that a particular natural or scientific phenomena always occurs if certain conditions are present.
Okay. But that again, you see, when it says law of material nature, the material nature, what is it? Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhire vacha ahankara iti ame bina pakritirastata. It has earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. This is material nature, right? But the material nature is controlled by Krishna himself. So we don't hear anything about Krishna in this definition of law. Actually, that's the whole point. If you say there's a law, there has to be a lawmaker. This is what's missing in the scientific, let's say, world of speculation. They refuse to talk about the lawmaker. Of course, in their definitions of law, when you come to limiting definitions like the law of the state, the law of the country, the law of your housing project, right? They always name the person who's in charge of that law, or the organization that's in charge of that law. But when they talk about nature, they don't scientists talk about laws. They don't mention the lawmaker. Is there any mention of the lawmaker in those definitions? Is there any mention of lawmaker in those definitions?
Law implies imposition by a sovereign authority and the obligation
Read it again slowly.
Law implies imposition by a sovereign authority.
Okay, sovereign authority.
And the obligation of obedience on the part of all subject to that authority obey the law.
Okay. But they don't mention who that authority is. You see. So everything remains vague. And that's why I say the dictionary can be very misleading. Although we look it up to find out what words mean, but they don't actually give us the full meaning. They give us these partial meanings. They leave out the most important thing, which is Krishna. So therefore, if you leave something out in an explanation, that means that the people that follow your explanation will be also leaving something out. They'll be missing something. And because of that, they never really achieve the purpose of life, because they're not giving the full understanding. Just like it says that the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Now, what is reality distinguished from illusion? That is the difference between Krishna and Maya. Maya is illusion, right? And reality, the ultimate reality, is Krishna. And if you're dealing with Krishna, you're also dealing with something that's for the welfare of everyone, not just a certain group of people. Now, when we talk about the laws of nature, we're talking about the entire creation. Nature is referring to the whole creation of the universe. And those laws cannot be in any way compromised. So therefore, when an Elon Musk says, we're going to establish communities on Mars, that's a nonsense statement. They don't have, he doesn't have the authority to establish a community on another planet. He can't even establish his own community in this planet. How's he going to do on another planet where there's other living entities that are superior to us, and so forth. So we see how as long as people have half or partial definitions of words, they will never achieve perfection in life. And we have to understand that most of the definitions in the dictionary are partial definitions or wrong definitions. Just like when it says that yoga is a Hindu exercise or something like that. That's a completely wrong definition. So, therefore, when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavad Gita, especially Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada defines things correctly and in their full meaning. This is something we have to understand. Otherwise, you just take it for granted. Whatever it says in the dictionary, that's the truth. It's not necessarily true. There are partial truths, and there's false explanations also in the dictionaries. Okay. So that's, they don't teach you that in school, do they? Did they tell you that most of the definitions are incomplete or can be false also. That's why it's important these things and research them. Okay, so we read 18 in the 8th chapter, 17th verse, very important verse if you want to understand this chapter, calculation of time from the atom. Okay, so now we'll go quickly through some of these verses to the end of the chapter. And you can read, you don't have to read the Sanskrit, just read the English. And so we can start. Go ahead. Give her the microphone. We got to get the longer.
We have.
Is that the longer one? Okay, good.
Text 35, translation. In the beginning of the first half of Brahma's life, there was a millennium called Brahma Kalpa, wherein Lord Brahma appeared. The birth of the Vedas was simultaneous with Brahma's birth.
With Brahma's birth. Was simultaneous with Brahma's birth?
Purport. According to Padma Purana.
Simultaneous meaning it happened at the same time. If you don't know that word, write it down. Simultaneous. Go ahead.
Purport. According to Padma Purana, in 30 days of Brahma, many kalpas take place, such as the Varaha Kalpa and Pitra Kalpa. 30 days make 1 month of Brahma, beginning from the full moon to the disappearance of the moon. 12 such months complete 1 year, and 50 years complete one parardha, or 1/2 the duration of life of Brahma. The Sweta Varaha appearance of the Lord is the first birthday of Brahma. The birthday of Brahma is in the month of March, according to Hindu astronomical calculation. This statement is reproduced from the explanation of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura.
So we're going to see a lot of statements we may or may not understand now. Don't worry about that. But also, there are sometimes different authorities have different opinions. You're going to see that here also. But this is just to give a general idea of Brahma and the duration of his life. Okay, so go to the next verse. You don't have to read the Sanskrit.
Chapter 3, Canto 3, Chapter 11, Text 36. The millennium, the translation, the millennium which followed the first Brahma millennium is known as the Padma Kalpa, because in that millennium the universal lotus flower grew out of the navel reservoir of water of the personality of Godhead Hari.
So it's talking about Garbhodakshay Vishnu and the lotus flower, the lotus stem and the flower that grew from his navel. And then Brahma appeared on the top of the whorl, or the flower of that navel. Go ahead.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The millennium following the Brahma Kalpa is known as the Padma Kalpa because the universal lotus grows in that millennium. The Padma Kalpa is also called the Pritra Kalpa in certain Puranas.
Okay, so you see, it gets really convoluted, complicated. But anyway, Prabhupada is going through this so that if you're going to go deeply into this subject, you'll see that sometimes certain words are used and other words are used and so forth. Go ahead. Next.
O descendant of Bharata, the first millennium in the second half of the life of Brahma is also known as Varaha millennium, because the personality of Godhead appeared in that millennium as the hog incarnation. So, purport. The different millenniums known as the Brahma, Padma, and Varaha Kalpas appear a little puzzling for the layman.
A little puzzling for the layman.
There are some scholars who think these kalpas to be one and the same. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the Brahma Kalpa in the beginning of the first half appears to be the Padma Kalpa. We can, however, simply abide by the text and understand that the present millennium is in the second half of the duration of the life of Brahma.
Okay, so you see there's some differences of opinion of different authorities. So Prabhupada is trying to settle that issue by saying, look, this is basically talking about the second half of the duration of life of Brahma. Go ahead.
Yeah, 3.1.38, Srimad Bhagavatam, translation. The duration of the two parts of Brahma's life, as above mentioned, is calculated to be equal to 1 nimesha, less than a second, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's unchanging and unlimited and is the cause of all causes of the universe.
So again, you see the relativity of time. The different parts of Brahma's life, it's calculated to be equal to 1 nimesa, less than a second for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's the time of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as opposed to the time of Brahma. Right? Okay, go ahead.
Purport. The great sage Maitreya has given a considerable description of the time of different dimensions, beginning from the atom up to the duration of the life of Brahma. Now he attempts to give some idea of the time of the unlimited personality of Godhead.
Notice the word some idea.
He just gives a hint of his unlimited time by the standard of the life of Brahma. The entire duration of the life of Brahma is calculated to be less than a second of Lord's time, and it is explained in Brahma Samhita as follows. Yasyaika nishvasita kala matavalamya jivanti loma vilaja jagadanda nadha Vishnur mahan sahiha yasya kala visesho govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, whose plenary portion is Mahavishnu. All the heads of the innumerable universes, the Brahmas, live only by taking shelter of the time occupied by one of his breaths.
Notice it says here, the plenary portion. So Mahavishnu is a plenary portion. That means there's some things that Krishna has that Mahavishnu doesn't have, right? So you have to, although Mahavishnu has some things that are equal to Krishna, but he has other things that are missing. Okay, go ahead.
The impersonalists do not believe in the form of the Lord, and thus they would hardly believe in the Lord's sleeping. Their idea is obtained by a poor fund of knowledge. They calculate everything in terms of man's capacity.
Very important statement. They calculate everything in terms of man's capacity. So that means that they're trying to understand Krishna through the prism of limited human ability. Obviously, they're not going to understand very much about Krishna because they're comparing Krishna to an ordinary human being. This is the fault of Mayavad philosophy. Go ahead.
They think that the existence of the Supreme is just the opposite of active human existence. Because the human being has senses, the Supreme must be without sense perception. Because the human being has a form, the Supreme must be formless. And because the human being sleeps, the Supreme must not sleep. Srimad Bhagavatam, however, does not agree with such impersonalists. It is clearly stated herein that the Supreme Lord rests in Yoga Nidra, as previously discussed. And because he sleeps, naturally he must breathe. And the Brahma Samhita confirms that within his breathing period, innumerable Brahmas take birth and die. There is complete agreement between Srimad Bhagavatam and Brahma Samhita. The eternal time is never lost along with the life of Brahma. The eternal time is never lost along with the life of Brahma. It continues, but it has no ability to control the Supreme Personality of Godhead because the Lord is the controller of time. In the spiritual world, there is undoubtedly time, but it has no control over activities. Time is unlimited, and the spiritual world is also unlimited, since everything there exists on the absolute plane.
So you can learn a lot of things from this one purport. You learn what the faults of the Mayavadis are, some of the severe faults that they have. You learn a lot about Krishna's unique position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You learn that there's complete agreement between Srimad Bhagavatam and the Brahma Samhita. So these are the type of notes you should take. You're not, you're beginning to learn things that will be very important later on when you begin to preach and explain things to other people. These are things that we have to have absolute convictions of, or certainty. It's like, for example, there's complete agreement between Srimad Bhagavatam and the Brahma Samhita. Now you'll find out as you read more Brahma Samhita and Srimad Bhagavatam, they completely agree on every point. And then the fatal flaw of the Mayavadis is that they calculate everything in terms of man's capacity. So you're going to be faced with many Mayavadis in this world. They outnumber the devotees, unfortunately. But now you know what their Achilles heel is. Look that word up, Achilles heel. Heel, H-E-A-L, Achilles. Achilles heel. Give him the microphone.
A weakness or a vulnerable point.
Vulnerable point. In other words, if you smash the heel, it breaks the foot. The person can't walk. So the whole philosophy of the Mayavadis can be destroyed by this one statement here. That is, that they calculate everything in terms of man's capacity. That is their Achilles heel. That's their weakest point. And if you smash that point, it breaks their whole philosophy. They lose any ability of succeeding to convince other people, because they're comparing everything to man's capacity. They have no idea of the transcendental nature of the Lord. You see how Prabhupada, in one sentence, he can destroy a whole false philosophical, let's say, whole philosophical, concept. So the Mayavad philosophy, its weakest point is that it compares everything to man's, or it tries to calculate everything in terms of man's capacity. So you see, these are simple English words, but they have huge meanings. And if you read this quickly, you miss all the important statements that are being made. But if we go over it slowly like this, you suddenly realize, wait a minute, this is a way of defeating the whole Mayavad philosophy, right? And if you, now, does it mean you understand it completely? Not yet. But you're beginning to understand what is the weakness of the philosophy of the Mayavadis. And then as we keep reading, Prabhupada will keep giving more and more information in these one, two, or one sentence or a few words explanations. And if you pick them out and take notes, then you have a very strong foundation in Krishna conscious philosophy. Hari Bol. So did we finish that purport? Yes. Okay. Next, text 39.
Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay, and there's another major point. It says time has no control in the spiritual world. So now we're learning the difference between the effect of time in the material world and the effect of time in the spiritual world. Time has no effect in the spiritual world. It doesn't limit anything. But in the material world, time is all present and it controls everything. So there are major differences between the material world and the spiritual world. So here in one short, let's say, purport, you have a whole bunch of major statements that help you understand the difference between the material world and the spiritual world, the difference between Mayavad philosophy and Krishna consciousness, and to learn what the Achilles heel is of the Mayavad philosophy, etc. Okay, go ahead.
Translation. Eternal time is certainly the controller of different dimensions, from that of the atom up to the superdivisions of the duration of Brahma's life. But nevertheless, it is controlled by the Supreme. Time can control only those who are body conscious, even up to the Satyaloka or the other higher planets of the universe.
Now another major statement. Time can control only those who are body conscious. So everybody's body conscious in the material world. That's why we're all controlled by time. So these are all major statements, and they're all coming in these last couple of pages of this chapter, because the chapter is all about understanding time. You see? So that's why it's important to take notes and pick up these major statements that Prabhupada is making. Okay, go ahead.
3.11.40 Translation. This phenomenal material world is expanded to a diameter of 4 billion miles as a combination of 8 material elements transformed into 16 further categories, within and without, as follows.
Now you know what the diameter of the whole universe is. You see? These are all big pieces of information that help you understand Krishna consciousness. 4 billion miles. Now, people will argue with you about, 4 billion miles. No, it's much longer than that. Blah, 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 blah. But we have to stick to what the Bhagavatam says. Go ahead.
Purport. As explained before, the entire material world is a display of 16 diversities and 8 material elements. The analytical studies of the material world are the subject matter of Sankhya philosophy. The first 16 diversities are the 11 senses and 5 sense objects, and the 8 elements are the gross and subtle matter, namely earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego. All these combined together are distributed throughout the entire universe, which extends diametrically to 4 billion miles. Besides this universe of our experience, there are innumerable other universes. Some of them are bigger than the present one, and all of them are clustered together under similar material elements as described below.
There's a lot of information there. Anyway, let's go. We're going to finish this chapter. What your homework is. Make a list of what you would consider very important statements that Prabhupada makes in these last 6 or 7 verses. Like, what is the diameter of the material world? What is the fault of the Mayavadis? What are the 11 or the 16 categories and the 8 material elements? So make notes of what these things are, these statements are, because you'll be very happy to do it, because you're going to encounter these issues in many other places, and you become familiar with them. It won't be like a puzzle. It'll be you'll understand much better, because here Prabhupada is giving a whole bunch of information that is essential for understanding Krishna consciousness. Okay, next.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So next is 3.11.41 translation. The layers or elements covering the universes are each 10 times thicker than the one before, and all the universes clustered together appear like atoms in a huge combination.
So this is another major revelation Prabhupada is making, that besides the diameter of the universe being 4 billion miles, there's coverings. There are 5 major coverings of the universe, and each covering is 10 times bigger than the previous one. Now you understand why there can be some, let's say, argument about what is the diameter of the universe. The diameter of the visible universe is 4 billion miles, but there are 5 major coverings, each one 10 times bigger. Okay? So all this is important information if you want to be able to preach Krishna consciousness. So go ahead.
Purport. The coverings of the universes are also constituted of the elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and each is 10 times thicker than the one before. The first covering of the universe is earth, and it is 10 times thicker than the universe itself. If the universe is 4 billion miles in size, then the size of the earthly covering of the universe is 4 billion times 10. The covering of water is 10 times greater than the earthly covering. The covering of fire is 10 times greater than the watery covering. The covering of air is 10 times greater than that of the fire. The covering of ether is 10 times greater still than that of air, and so on. The universe within the coverings of matter appears to be like an atom in comparison to the coverings, and the number of universes is unknown even to those who can estimate the coverings of the universes.
It's unbelievable statements. Right, it's amazing statements Prabhupada is making here. Okay, now we'll finish the chapter. Go ahead, next verse.
So next is 3.11.42. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is therefore said to be the original cause of all causes. Thus the spiritual abode of Vishnu is eternal, without a doubt. And it is also the abode of Mahavishnu, the origin of all manifestations. Purport. Lord Mahavishnu, who is resting in Yoga Nidra on the causal ocean and creating innumerable universes by his breathing process, only temporarily appears in the Mahatattva for the temporary manifestation of the material worlds. He is a plenary portion of Lord Sri Krishna. And thus, although he is non-different from Lord Krishna, his formal appearance in the material world as an incarnation is temporary. The original form of personality of Godhead is actually the Swarupa or real form, and he eternally resides in Vaikuntha world, Vishnu Loka. The word Mahatmana is used here to indicate Mahavishnu, and his real manifestation is Lord Krishna, who is called Parma, as confirmed in the Brahm Samhita. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Nadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. The Supreme Lord is Krishna, the original personality of Godhead, known as Govinda. His form is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, and he is the original cause of all causes.
Okay, so now Prabhupada is putting in context the difference between Mahavishnu and Krishna himself. This is important, very important. Otherwise, we will have a partial understanding. But now we're getting the full understanding. So then your homework is you take notes of these big statements that are being made, like difference between Mahavishnu and Krishna, and the diameter of the universe, but then the coverings, 16 coverings, and then how each covering, or not 16 coverings, but the 5 coverings, how each one is 10 times bigger than the previous one. All these are very important things to learn to get a general idea of what's called cosmology, the makeup of the material universe. Then you can understand that there's a difference between the material universe and the spiritual universe. And one difference is that time has no influence in the spiritual universe. But time is controlling everything in the material universe. So you see, in a few pages, he makes these huge statements that have very deep meaning. So we'll stop right there. You have some homework for tomorrow. We learned a few words also. Are there any questions?
So Maharaj, 11 senses.
Yeah, that means
so
you have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and you have
5 working senses.
The 5 working senses, right?
Yeah.
The arms, legs,
and then
the anus, genital.
But the mind is
tongue,
also separate.
Tongue, right? And then you have the mind. That's
yes.
number 11.
So here, so then mind is considered both in the 16 diversities as part of the senses, but also as the 8 elements.
As what?
So here in the purport of 3:11:40, so Prabhupada writes that the first 16 diversities are 11 senses and 5 sense objects, and the 8 elements are the gross and subtle matter. So the mind is considered both in the senses and also in the elements.
Okay, we'll answer that tomorrow.
Okay.
I want to look at that more carefully. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
Yeah. So back to verse 3.11.34. So it mentioned that the 100 years of Brahma's life are divided into 2 parts, the first half and the second half. And the first half of the duration of Brahma's life is already over, and the second half is now current. So with this verse, actually, it seems like this Bhagavatam is in context to the current our yuga.
Yes.
Or yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, but I thought it's like eternal, like Bhagavad Gita. It's always there. Isn't that true?
Well, you're trying to understand the duration of Brahma's life. So, in this period, he's already passed half of his life, and the other half is going on now. So you are up to date in the explanation of Brahma's time. Okay? So that now, because the duration of time is so big that there's no mistake here. He's already passed half his life, and now is in the second half. That's all to understand.
I don't have a question about the calculation. Means it looks like Srimad Bhagavatam is because in this mention here the time of we already passed and we are currently on this. So it looks like this Bhagavatam is spoken context to what we are in the current yuga or whatever we have, right?
Yes.
So, but but my understanding was Bhagavatam was always there, not only for these yugas, but it was always eternal kind of thing. Like Bhagavad Gita, it's not only this 5,000 years he spoke, but it was eternally there. So same way Bhagavatam was eternally there. If it is considered as eternal, always there, then if it speaks about only this era or this yuga, it doesn't reconcile to me.
It's not speaking only of this particular time. He's explaining what's being explained is the duration of time of Lord Brahma. Well, he's explaining it practically. Where we are now, he's already passed half his life, and he has his other half to go. So what's not eternal about that? You understand? I mean, like we say, well, Pradyumna Prabhu is he's like 48 years old. Now, does that mean that there's a mistake in saying that you're 48 years old? No. That's how old you are right now. So he's saying that right now Brahma has passed 50 years of his life, and he has another 50 years to go. What's wrong with that statement? It doesn't undermine the idea that the knowledge of the Srimad Bhagavatam is eternal. It's giving you a practical explanation of where we are in time. The whole chapter is about the calculation of time from the atom. So you can calculate the life of Brahma also. It's part of this explanation. Okay, so we will, go ahead. Go real quick, we have to end.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, somewhere we were reading that Brahma's life is 1 second of the Lord's life. I don't understand, because if the Lord's life if Brahma's life is 1 second of the Lord's life, then
okay,
I don't
you have
understand.
to look up the word relativity. Relativity. So, like for example, an ant may live only, let's say, for a period of spring and summer, and then it dies. You live, let's say, 80 years. So the ant's full lifetime is just spring and summer, but you have many springs and many summers in your lifetime. So the calculation of time of your body is different than the calculation of time of the ant. So that's called relativity.
If Brahma's life is 1 second of the Lord's life, then, because if you're saying that, then Brahma would have ended his life right away because he's in the spiritual world.
No. See, just like the ant's entire life, he's born, he grows, he works, he has children, and he dies. It happens in a period of, let's say, spring and summer. But you go through those same stages, but it takes you 80 years. So your body is different than the ant's body, and the ant's body's concept of time is different than your concept of time. There's relativity based on the body. Okay, Haribol. Hare Krishna. Okay. So, like from today on, we're going to start having homework. That homework, you'll learn a lot of things if you do it.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. Bandhamui savadhana mate. Jahara prasade bhai e bhava toriya jai. Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoyte. Guru mukha padma vakya chitete koriya kya. Arna kori ho mane asha. Shri Guru Charane rati aise uttama gati. जय प्रसाद पूरे सर्व आशा। जय प्रसाद पूरे सर्व आशा। चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से। दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो। प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते। वेदे गाय जहाँ रचरितो। श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आधम जनारा बंधु। लोके नाथ लोके राजीवाना। हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पादा छाया। हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पादा छाया। ए बेजास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना। शिला प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना। जय प्रभुपदा 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 जय प्रभुपदा। नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिन्यति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरा भक्त वृंद। चैतन्य नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Chaitanya Nityananda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From his ecstatic prema emanates by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.